The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Jesus instructed the 12 as follows: "Anyone who prefers father or mother to me is not worthy of me. Anyone who prefers son or daughter to me is not worthy of me. Anyone who does not take his cross and follow in my footsteps is not worthy of me. Anyone who finds his life will lose it. Anyone who loses his life for my sake will find it. Anyone who welcomes you welcomes me, and those who welcome me welcome the one who sent me. Anyone who welcomes a prophet because he is a prophet will have a prophet's reward. And anyone who welcomes a holy man because he is a holy man will have a holy man's reward. If anyone gives so much as a cup of cold water to one of these little ones because he is a disciple, then I tell you solemnly, he will most certainly not lose his reward." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
In the opening prayer, I know it seems like such a long time ago, 15 minutes, but we prayed that we may always be found standing in the bright light of truth. The bright light of truth. And because of the world that we live in, where truth and falsehood, good and evil, freedom and imprisonment in the moral sense coexist, it can be quite difficult sometimes for us to see this. Because Jesus Christ talks to us about his own light. He says, "I am the light of the world. He who follows me will not be walking in the darkness." Great. But then there's also another light, in inverted commas. It's actually a darkness. But you see, before Satan became Satan, what was he called? Lucifer. From the Latin, lux lucis, light, light bearer. You see, but then he rejects God and then becomes Satan. So he becomes now, of course, in his malice and his evil and hatred and jealousy towards God's children, he wants to shed his falsehood as if it were some other kind of light. But because we're weak and fallen human beings, we can be seduced by that false light. And any light that purports to come from God but is somehow missing sacrifice, missing the cross, is essentially a satanic light. It's Lucifer's light. It's why, for instance, when Peter is trying to convince Jesus that the cross, suffering, death, not a good idea, after they just come down from Mount Tabor, and after that Peter had said to Jesus, that you are the Son of God. And Peter says, "Simon, son of Jonah, you're a happy man. It's my Father who's revealed this to you." Jesus calls Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. Get behind me, Satan, because your way, your light is a false light. It is not the light that my Father shines upon me and I shine to the world." So there's no true light except the light that comes from Christ. And the light that comes from Christ is the crucifixion, the cross. Not that we've got to be crucified, but you understand the idea. And so anything else is a falsehood. Now, why does Jesus say, anyone who prefers father or mother to me is not worthy of me? Anyone who prefers son or daughter to me is not worthy of me? Because when we love other creatures more than God, then there's a problem. Because our tendency when we love is to love imperfectly. You see, no matter how good a parent we might be or think we are, do we always love our children perfectly? And the answer is no. No matter how good a son or daughter we are or think we are, do we always love our parents as we should? No. In fact, I often think to myself, my father and mother love me more than I could ever love them. There's some extraordinary capacity as human beings. But it's only through the love of God that we are enabled to love one another properly. So of course it's right that father and mother love their children. It is right that children love their mother and father, their grandparents, but in the proper order. And that proper order can only come through love of Christ and him as a crucified Christ, as St. Paul tells us. You see, because in our relationships, our love is imperfect. Many a times it's in the right direction, but sometimes it becomes selfish. Other imperfections enter in, and that's where you see the light of Christ is what keeps us on the right track. But let's just go a little bit deeper into the meaning of the cross, because the theme of the cross comes up many a time in the course of a year, a liturgical year. The cross is not just simply a suffering. I can have a headache. That's not a cross. I mean, I can choose to bear it, but what do we often do when we've got a serious headache? I have an ice cream, right? No? Okay. You take a tablet or something, right? Panadol, right? And then have a glass of wine or a headache. So you do that. We can treat with pain. We can treat that with medication. But when I'm going through another cross that I can't treat with medication, I'm experiencing boredom. I'm experiencing an anxiety. I'm experiencing fear and apprehension about the future. I'm worried about this relationship. I can't take a medication, and taking half a bottle of wine or whiskey or whatever to drown out the sorrows, that's not a treatment either. It's just ignoring the reality for some time. So you see, the cross is always a suffering that we actually cannot get rid of. But it's all about the attitude with which we face the cross that then determines the whole outcome. St. John of the Cross, the famous 16th century Spanish spiritual writer, says that those who love the cross embrace it. Those who do not simply drag it behind. In other words, they cannot actually get away from it, but they're trying to do something that is futile, that is impossible. But the one who loves the cross sees it as the vehicle to eternal life, just as Jesus himself did. So it's about the way in which we address or confront the cross. Let's look at the bad spirit or bad way of confronting the cross, and then the right way of confronting the cross. This is what will enable us to always stand in the bright light of truth, the truth of Christ. Those who do not handle the cross well, first of all, there are many in our world who, when they encounter suffering that they cannot get over, in fact, instead of trying to see some meaning in it, they simply complain and whinge and say, why me? Poor is me. Woe is me. Why don't others have to carry this? Sound like a similar echo? Right. We've probably done that, all of us, ourselves, at some stage. Now, if this is the way we normally face the cross, through complaining, through whinging and lamenting, then the cross can make us bitter. And I've seen people, and I'm sure you have too, who've had to suffer deeply in their lives, but because they did not embrace their suffering with the right spirit, they end up becoming bitter. I remember years ago coming across a gentleman who'd had a lot of difficulty in his life, and he was telling me how when he comes across people who are suffering, his response is, "Get over it. I've had to do it tough too." You see, that's a hardness of heart. Whereas when we carry the cross with the right spirit, with grace, what it does is it calls for our surrender, our interior surrender to God. Rather than complaining, why does this happen to me? Why do I always have to be the one to sacrifice myself? Why do I have to put my own interests aside? The question is, okay, Lord, help me to accept this. Right now, I don't want to accept this. I don't want to carry this. I don't want to, and all the good reasons that I may have had for carrying the cross at that moment don't convince me. Because reason, as St. John Paul II says in his letter on faith and reason back in 1998, and he says, human reason comes crashing on the cliff of suffering. At that moment when I am carrying the cross, when I am suffering an anguish, a difficulty that I can't do anything about, by uniting myself to Christ's own sufferings, to him as a person who also suffered, and he didn't have to suffer. He did not have to. He is the innocent one. I'm not. But by uniting myself to him, I actually mysteriously am surrendering to his grace and allowing him to tenderize me. Now, tenderizing is an expression we'll usually use about preparing a steak for cooking. But there's a moral tenderizing, you might say. It might be things like wearing off my pride, my vanity, my self-sufficiency, my impatience, my anger. In the mini-series that was a hit back in the 80s, and it was called The Thornbirds. Some of you might remember that. Now I'm showing my age, But the reality, and I remember at one stage there, so this young, ambitious Monsignor who wants to become a cardinal. So God love you, you can keep it, But the old cardinal, who was like his spiritual advisor, was sending him back. The priest falls in love with a lovely woman back in Australia. So he's sent back from the Vatican to come and serve in this region. He's saying, you're putting me back in that situation where I have to encounter this difficulty. And he says, yes, it might also help break that pride of yours by experiencing the weakness. Now, of course, the guy wasn't trying to get him to fall into sin or anything like that, but rather to confront himself, because the cross makes us confront ourselves. It makes us look at what we think is actually virtue, but oftentimes is just arrogance. The Pharisees suffered from this. The Pharisees thought everything they were doing is fine, except it's just happened to be in their speech. But in their actions, a lot of hypocrisy. And one place in St. Matthew's Gospel, chapter 23, actually, he calls them whitewashed tombs. Whitewashed tombs. The cross actually helps us to encounter ourselves. It humbles us from the inside. It makes us realize that we're all very small indeed, irrespective of our position, of our background, a status or whatever. This is then what enables us to follow Christ. And mysteriously then, he enables his light to shine through us. That's why the opening prayer is actually something very special that we're praying for, that we may be found standing in the bright light of truth. To the worldly eyes, the light of truth of Christ is a lost cause. But to those on the way to salvation, it is in fact the way to freedom. You see, because when you ask many people, what is human existence all about? Many will say, well, have fun, have an education, get a good job, get a house, car, whatever. It's basically the one who dies with the most toys wins. That's the earthly understanding of human existence. But the supernatural, the Christian understanding is those who learn how to die to themselves, in fact, earn the greatest treasure, and they will then have a high reward in the next life, where it all really begins. It begins here, but that's the fullness of life there. When Jesus uses the word here, he who finds his life loses it, and loses his life finds it, loses it for my sake, finds it. He's using the word zoe in the Greek. There are two words for life in the Greek. So Zoe, the common name now for a girl. But there's another word in the Greek for life, which is bio or bios, which is biological life. That's not the life he is referring to. He's referring to the human life, having life to the full. John 10:10. And this is what he wants us to have. And so today, as we think about these familiar words once more, again, a chance for us to reflect upon the cross in our own lives. Do we know how to carry the cross with grace, or which enables us to be transformed, or do we carry the cross begrudgingly, which, as St. John of the Cross would say, is simply dragging it behind?